Today's date is August 16th, 2024. This is Kelly Zakovic representing the City of Savannah's Municipal Archives. I'm interviewing Leonard Brown for the Savannah Community Memory Project. We're conducting this interview at the City of Savannah Adams Complex. So thank you for joining us today. And can you start by telling us your full name?
My name is Leonard Alvin Brown.
All right, and what schools are you here to share with us about today?
I'm here to share with you about Springfield Terrace Elementary School and also Pearl Lee Smith Elementary School.
All right. So when we were talking, you told me that you have several family connections to the school.
Right.
Can you start by telling us about William Henry Brown?
Yes, Professor William Henry Brown was my great uncle, and he's an uncle of Pastor Matthew Southall Brown. His father and Henry Brown were brothers. Professor Henry Brown was the second principal of Springfield Terrace Elementary School. And there was some controversies about whether he was one of the founders or not. I happen to have Professor Henry Brown's obituary from the Savannah Tribune. And this is dated 1933. He actually died May 1933. And in the obituary, it mentions the fact that he had done a lot of work with Springfield Terrace School. And from what I read, it mentions the fact that he started a night school in this area. And eventually it became a day school. And Mrs. Pearl Lee Smith became interested in the school. And from that point, the school had its development. There was another article in the Tribune around the time that he died, which was an editorial. This is the editorial for Professor Henry Brown. And in this editorial, it mentions the fact that, and I want to read just one sentence, were it not for Mr. Brown's, possibly there would not have been a Springfield Terrace public school. And in this article, it talks about the different groups of people who got together to form the committee to organize the school. Miss Pearlie Smith was on the committee. And I also read that Reverend L.M. Glenn, who was a pastor of First Bryan Baptist Church, was on the committee also. I'd like to show you this also. This was in my father's papers. He kept talking about Springfield Terrace when we were children. And we said, he would always say, well, we have a relative who might have started the school, but we didn't pay any attention. Well, going through his papers, I found this article. And he had made a copy of it. And I asked someone to reproduce it, but this is the original from his papers. Now, there's an interesting connection between Springfield Terrace and the Brown family. This is Mrs. Jane Burns Brown. This is Henry Brown's mother, Pastor Matthew Southall Brown's grandmother, and my great-grandmother. We had two relatives who taught at Springfield Terrace, well, Pearl Lee Smith School, I should say. This is Pastor Brown's sister, Helen Brown Fletcher. She taught at at the Pearl Lee Smith School. And if you ask some of the people who you may interview in this process and mention her name, you will hear them talk about Miss Fletcher. She was a stern teacher. And coincidentally, Miss Fletcher's daughter, Helen Fletcher Scroggins, also taught at Pearl Lee Smith Elementary School. So there's a great family connection here. And we are very proud of our connection with the school. Now, there's something else that's sort of interesting too. When I was a child, my father used to take us to Miss Pearl Lee Smith's home. She lived on Wheaton Street. And I don't know what they talked about, but we would sit on her porch, and Sunday afternoon, he would be talking to Miss Smith. I would imagine about school business, because he was a great PTA worker. Right next door to Miss Pearlie Smith's home was a lady by the name of Miss Sweet Bing Roberts, who was also an educator in the city of Savannah. Those homes do not exist anymore. But I just thought that it was interesting that I guess he was sitting at her feet gaining knowledge about education and that kind of thing and community involvement. So those are connections that I have with the school, and I'm grateful that we're trying to preserve this particular history.
Okay, well, thank you. Can I ask you a few follow-up questions on
Sure.
some of that? And for the purpose of the interview, we will have copies of the things that
Right.
Mr. Brown is showing us, but so you can reference those articles. But okay, so for William to Henry Brown, do you have an approximate idea of what years he taught at, or what years he was the principal at the school?
I have no idea. He died in 1933. So if we looked at when the school actually started, which I don't have that information, that would give an idea as to the approximate time that he was at the school.
So you mentioned that he started a night school, which turned into a day school. Do you
Mhm.
know where that was located?
In the obituary, it said that he was concerned about the education of the people in the Springfield Terrace community. And it mentioned the fact that they met in a rundown church. It didn't mention the name of the church is where the night school started. But specifically, the year that took place, I couldn't give you that information. I tried to find, even trying to find a picture of him, which I can't find. Mhm.
So for Helen Brown Fletcher, what did she teach?
I think she taught just general English, because she was a great reader and a great communicator.
And do you know when she worked there?
Yeah, in the 80s, around the 1980s.
And for how long, do you know?
I think she retired from Pearlie Smith, but I don't know when she retired. Just to give you a point of reference, I've been retired 25 years, so she was older than I, so.
And what did her daughter teach? Do you know?
Her daughter was a math teacher. She was a math whiz, so she taught. And can I mention one story that Aunt Helen told us? She said she had a class of students at Pearlie Smith, and she was correcting this young lady's behavior. And the young lady said, "I'm gonna go home and tell my mama that you were picking on me." So the lady brought her daughter back to school. And when she walked in Aunt Helen's classroom, the mother said, Miss Fletcher, you were my teacher." And the little girl just sunk because she thought sure she was gonna get even with, Aunt Helen for disciplining her. So that sort of shows you the connection of parent-teacher relationships.
So you said she was a stern lady. Do you have any other stories about her?
I have one other story Aunt Helen told us. There was a teacher at Pearlie Smith by the name of Mrs. Hattie Moore. She was a longtime educator. And Miss Moore was a musician. And she said as the children entered Pearlie Smith, Mrs. Moore would be playing In the Little Red Schoolhouse. Are you familiar with that song? No. Well, she would be playing In the Little Red Schoolhouse on the piano, and you could hear it throughout the building as the students were coming in to go to their classes. And that was a tradition that they had at that time.
Any other stories?
I have a cousin's husband, Richard Dinkins. His family went to Pearlie Smith's children, and Richard Dinkins' brother said that he didn't like the teacher that he had at Pearlie Smith. So he took himself out of the teacher's class and walked to Miss Fletcher, Aunt Helen's class, and put himself in her class. And that's where he stayed for the rest of that school year. I thought that was sort of hilarious, that he placed himself where he wanted to be. And hopefully they have signed up for an interview, because I told them about, the school's history. But they are the Dinkins family.
Okay. I'll have to follow up with you about contact information for them. And so you said your Aunt Helen's daughter was a math teacher. Do you know when she was there and for how long?
She probably taught in the 90s. I told her daughter, Helen Willis, who lives in Atlanta, about this information and that kind of thing, but she's not able to make it. But she says she has a lot of information about the school at her mother's home. So I don't know whether she's going to forward it, but I gave her the information. So her name is Helen Willis. She's a council person in South Fulton.
Okay. I'll follow up with that. And then you mentioned going to Pearlie Smith's home. Can you share any memories about that?
I remember she had rocking chairs on her porch. And I was a little fella and I had a hard time getting in the rocking chairs. And I remember her house was painted sort of an orange color because people on that street had different color homes. And they were two-story homes. And that's all that I can remember because I was just a little fella sitting there in those rocking chairs. And I don't know what they were talking about. I couldn't hear them speaking. I probably wasn't paying attention. But that was sort of a thing that was done, I guess, to gain knowledge from her.
And you said
I mentioned one other thing. The lady who lived next door to her, Miss Sweet Bing Roberts, was a teacher in Savannah. She taught at Haven Home School. And I'll never forget, at First African, Miss Sweet Bing Roberts announced her retirement. And they said that Miss Sweet Bing Roberts taught in Chatham County Public Schools for 44 years. And she only missed one day. Now, that has stuck with me, and I'm 73 years old. I have never forgotten that, and that was in the basement of First African Baptist Church. And all those incidents sort of leads you to, and leads me to where I am today in terms of being a teacher. Because, you know, you had those professional ladies and gentlemen who carried themselves well, and expressed themselves well, and, you know, were proud of their profession, and that's what we looked up to teachers, in which we don't do as much today.
So you were a teacher before you retired?
Yeah, I was a teacher.
In Chatham County?
I worked in DeKalb County.
Okay. So, do you have any just general knowledge about the school that I could ask you about, or you predominantly wanted to share about your family's?
I just wanted to mention the connection because I never attended. I went to DeRed Elementary School.
Did you, like as a kid growing up, did you know kids that went to Pearlie Smith?
And that's interesting because Pearlie Smith was, we didn't live far from the school, right off of Victory Drive is where we lived. But I never heard anything about the school. And you know what else is interesting also? We would always call it Pearl E. Smith. And not until I became an adult, but it was Pearl Lee Smith, because I found myself saying that, Pearl E. Smith.
That's interesting. Do you know where kids who went there lived, roughly?
I would imagine they lived in Yamacraw. I mean, not Yamacraw, but Carver Village, since it's right in this vicinity.
Did they have any like sports teams? Did you guys play them in sports or anything?
I have no idea because I attended Harge and Duran. And we were all sort of in our own little clusters and that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, we know if, you know, crosstown rivalries for sports teams or anything like
Not
that.
really. Probably some of the other people may know.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us about the school today?
There's a picture that you all have in your advertisement that shows Mrs. Fletcher standing with a group of teachers. I don't have that with me, but she is in that photograph of the teacher standing in front of the school. It's on the table out front that she can be identified. And it also does me a great it gives me a great deal of pleasure to speak the names of the ancestors who came before and let people know that they were here and did contribute to the education of the students in the Chatham County school system.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Any last words?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.